Okay, so now that we have a halfway decent key, let's go ahead and see how we could continue with the shot. Yes, we would need to track probably the head, and there's really two options. We could take a 2D tracker and then just add a grid warp or so on top of that to modify his face, or we could go and 3D track or camera track his face and see which options that gives us. With a camera tracked head, we do have more options for modification, so I think we should go with that option. Okay, let's just move this to the side. We don't really need the composite at this stage anymore. Clean this up, and I'll add a camera tracker. I'll add a camera tracker. Source, connect the view. Now, we really don't want to track the entire image. All we want to do is really get the movement of his head. So we will also need a mask. So let's add a constant. Make sure that has the correct format. And now we'll add a roto to that. And we will make sure that we select the region for the trackers that really don't move that much. So what I'm trying to say is we need the movement of the head and not so much the movement of the facial expressions. Okay, we don't have any tracking markers, but we do have some features that might help with that. If we kind of scrub through the footage, we can see that we probably have a lot of movement around the mouth and probably also around the eye. Now, we do need some features, so I would say let's go for the forehead. Probably not so much facial movement in that. Yeah, we might also just include the eye, definitely the ear, but we're going to leave away the nose and the mouth. The gun in some parts, I don't know if you can see it somewhere right here. Let me skip back for it a little bit. The gun is actually touching his nose, so that really won't help our track. Okay, so I'll just draw our roto along the region that we've just described. Don't want to have any of the hair in as well. I'll leave a bit of room around the ears. Maybe go down right here. The cheek is going to really move. And maybe along here. There. Now once again we'll have to animate this. Doesn't really have to be brilliant. Or maybe I'm thinking maybe we should leave in some of these edges so that the trackers really can get a grasp somewhere. We need some contrasty points. Okay, move on. There. Let's scrub through to see if we've got any major movements that we've missed. This doesn't look too bad. definitely move these a little bit. Okay, I think fair enough. Let's also get rid of this. Okay, now that we've got an area for the track, we'll just feed that into the tracker right here. Mask and input mask source alpha. I'm pretty much going to leave everything in the default settings, but I'm going to check preview features, and that'll take a little second. Now we've got our little tracking markers here, but I must have chosen the wrong alpha. I said source alpha, but that's not really what I wanted. We wanted the mask alpha. And now our little preview tracking markers are inside of our mask, still not where I thought they would be. Let's have a look at the alpha. Okay. Still not the right setting, so let's try the mask inverted alpha, and now you can see it's probably subtracting the roto mask from this alpha image, and it actually has the tracking markers in the right position. Switch back to our RGBA view, and I think we're more or less ready to track. And let's just go and hit track features. Okay, I had just paused the screen capture for a second, and let's have a look. If we go to display track quality and then scrub through, we can see the quality of our track. Now this only means how the tracks kind of stick to their point, which doesn't tell us a whole lot, because our problem is that we have areas that really move independently. This is not a static object like a building with a moving camera or something like that. Still, I'll say let's just go ahead and solve our camera here. Hit OK, and we'll go ahead and create the 3D scene. Hit create. Now automatically we get a camera tracking point cloud, and we get the camera and we get a scene. If we just jump into the scene right away, you can see we've got our point cloud right here. If we zoom out a little bit, we can do that by holding down the middle mouse button and Alt, and Control and left mouse down. We can kind of rotate in 3D space. Now this is supposed to be our face. These are the points tracked and their position in 3D space. Doesn't really look like a head, but does give us a pretty dense point cloud. So let's have a look at the camera, scrub through, and we can see the camera is also performing some kind of movement. Now let's add a scanline renderer to the scene. And let's add a constant as well. Connect that to our scanline renderer, connect the cam to our camera, and we'll switch back to do 2D, and we can see our point cloud right here. We can see that it's moving as well. But we don't know if it's moving with our head yet, so instead of connecting the scanline render to our background here, we'll, for the time, connect that to our scene. Sorry, not to our scene, to our key. Just for the time being. And when we now play, this does look like the points are actually sticking to the head. So what does that mean? That means that our camera right here now actually has the movement of the head. The tracked points in the 3D environment stay stable, but the camera has the movement. And when we look through the scanline renderer, it seems as if the points were moving, but in fact it's the camera that's moving, and I think we could use that to our advantage. Before I show you how, let's quickly make a little bit more room. Let's just move this to the side, and also we'll disconnect our point cloud here. We don't need that at the moment. Instead, we will also move this a bit further down, over here, just so that we have a little bit more space. Then we're going to read in a geometry. That'll be in the geo bin, and we'll load in the head mesh low. Open that. Okay, and now we'll connect that to the view, and maybe we'll also increase the size. And let's have a look. If you hit F, that'll center our object right here. Let's have a look what this is. This is a 3D head. I found that on the net. It's just a very, very basic head mesh. There are no features. It doesn't have a mouth. There's no eyes, and also no eyelashes, and so on and so forth. In fact, I went through and I kind of smoothed this out. I didn't want to have a really deep recess. So now, let us also connect our head to the scene here. Connect our viewer to the scene. Now we can see the camera, so we need to add a transform geo node so that we can move our head away from the camera. There. So why am I doing this? Why am I importing this 3D geometry into Nuke? Let me show you. We'll add a project 3D node. We'll connect that to our camera, and we'll connect that to the geometry. Now everything is in complete darkness. That is because we didn't connect the input yet. So let's connect our input, and we can see our scene is now being projected onto the head. Let me in fact move the head closer again, then you can see what I mean. Maybe a little bit to the side. There. You can kind of see our scene, our talent that we just keyed out is being projected onto our geometry here. Currently this doesn't make much sense since we haven't lined up our head geometry with our talent's face yet. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's just rotate that slightly. Oh, by the way, how do I know the position of the head? Where should the head be in 3D space? Can I just place it anywhere? If we connect our point cloud to our scene again, we can see that the point cloud starts right in here. So we assume that the points in front of the point cloud are in fact our head. So let's just move the head close to the position of where the point cloud is. We've just done a really basic track, so these tracking points don't have a huge validity, and neither does the camera movement. But anyway, maybe it's good enough. Okay, so now that we've got this in the position of the point cloud, if we look from the top here, we can see that we're pretty much lined up. The points go back in 3D space. That means that the track wasn't that good, and I didn't enter camera lens and lens distortion and so on and so forth. So this is definitely one of the reasons why these points are spread all through 3D space. But anyway, let's just assume that we're pretty much in a good position right in front where the first points start. Let's just deconnect them again, we don't need them any longer, and see if we can just line the head up manually with the face. As you can see, the nose of our face is right here, and the nose of our 3D geometry is right here. So what we have to do is probably tilt this down a little bit. Sorry, I can't really get a good view. There. Then the eye should line up with the eye. Maybe like this. You can see now the nose is pretty much filling its space. You know, this isn't a head modeled especially for our face, so the features like the nose and how far the eyes are apart will be a bit different. They won't be exact. So let's have another look at this, and it kind of seems that our head is not wide enough. So I'll just scale this up, scale our model up a little bit, make it a bit wider, maybe like this. So now getting there, still the eyes are a bit off. I'll adjust them, move this up again, but then that doesn't really match. So this is just a little bit of playing around. I mean, maybe this is also good enough. I don't know. Okay, what we can also do to see what we've produced here is go back to our scanline render and then switch into our 2D view again. Now, I just disconnected it from the background, the scanline render here, and this is what we're actually getting through the scanline render. This is actually our 3D geometry with the projection of the face on it. Now, I still have a feeling that our head isn't really in the correct position, since we should have a little bit more of his cheek here if we compare that to, if we compare that to our original, you know, his head is a bit further there, so I assume that we still have to tilt it a little bit more, so let's try and do that. Maybe like this. Let's have a look if his face still lines up. I mean, and let's check again if this has made a difference. Disconnect that for a second. We're getting a little bit more of his cheek right here. And yeah, connect that again. Go back into 3D view. I mean, I think it's already quite impressive. You know, you can now see the face from the front, which you couldn't really do beforehand, could you? So we're actually adding a little bit of information, even though we're just mocking this up. So if you do want to bring in your own geometry, you do have to bring in geometry where the UVs are already laid out. So what the UVs are like an instruction of, or a map of where the texture is supposed to go on the geometry. Let me show you. If I just image read and import the head UV JPEG, connect my viewer, switch to the 2D, and I'll just add a blur or something, just so that you can see the line clearly, because these are 1 pixel lines. So this is our UV map. This is kind of like our head cut open and rolled out. We've got the eyes and the nose and the mouth, but we've got the ears on the side, and these parts right here are actually the back of the head, and this is actually the top and, you know, below the chin. Now, if I wouldn't have laid these out in this fashion, I did this in a 3D application, then you just wouldn't know where to place our projection on the geometry. At the moment, we're getting an image like this through the scanline render, but we do have another option. If we go into the scanline render menu here and projection mode, render camera, and now switch that to UV. And now we get this really distorted image. And as you can see right here, I mean, it kind of resembles maybe the UV map that I've just imported. If we go back to the UV map, we can see that we have a square image, 2048 by 2048. So, and this is definitely not square. So let's go and change our constant and just choose 2048 by 2048. And that looks pretty similar to our UV map. And if I connect the two, you can actually see that we're rendering out our UVs. That means we're not just rendering out what the camera sees, but we're actually rendering out what's on top of our geometry, what's on top of our surface. And we're stripping our texture from our head, and we can modify it right here. So let me just quickly add a roto paint and do a little paint job on this. Let me take the brush here, switch that to all frames, and just let me do a really mean face. There. And now, if we go and we'll take our geometry, we'll take our scene, and we'll take our camera, and we'll just copy that, go back further down in the flow, and just paste that right in here. Now, as I said, we just stripped this texture off our geometry, and now we're just going to add this back onto our head. So we'll just connect our image input back to our roto right here. And we've got our camera, we've got our scene. Only thing that we're missing now is the scanline render. And we'll connect our, let me zoom in a little bit so you can see what I'm doing here. Let's connect our camera input. Let's connect our object input to the scene, and let's create, let's create a constant as well, like we did before. Make sure this is just our normal format size, not the 2040 by 2040. Connect that, and we'll add a merge right here, and we'll merge this on top of our original footage. Let me just clean this up a bit. Also move this back in, just so it's not in our way. And now if I connect my viewer to the merge, or maybe to the scanline render first, we can see we've got our head textured, and we've got the smiley that I've just drawn on top of that. And when we merge that over our result, I'm connected the wrong way around, of course. Then you can see we've got our smiley and the mesh on top of our head. So we've kind of retextured our geometry with this new modified version. Okay, so what does that give us? Well, let's switch on the proxy and then just hit play. And you can see that our shape is now moving with the head. We've tracked the forehead, so this is where we have almost no slipping and sliding. Then down here, where we've got a lot of facial movement, our mask doesn't quite match the movement, but I think we should be able to match that up later on. Okay, most of our action is going to take place right here where we've got our paint node with the smiley. That's where we're going to do all the retouching in this project. Before we start with the retouching, let me quickly group some of the nodes so we have a little bit more space, and I do apologize for my constant zooming and panning. It's really hard to follow, so let me just grab a couple of nodes and merge them into a group, and that'll hopefully make things a little bit easier for you and also for me, I guess. Just going to add these little helpers, and then I'm going to select all the things that I want to have in my group here, and then I'm just going to hit Control G, and that will create this little group node, and you can still access that group if you go into the group slider right here. It's created a couple of inputs that I don't really need. I can delete them if I want to. You know, these are just the unconnected inputs everywhere. Yeah, and that's it. And if I go back to the flow, you can see I've now got my group, and I'm going to label that. I'm going to call that my projection group, so that we know we did our projection in here, our projection onto the geometry. That gives us a lot more space. I'm going to delete this helper as well, and I'm going to move all this further up. And that should help to prevent me from zooming in all the time. Okay, as I was saying, most of our work is going to be done right here. Our UV mesh that we've brought in, that's just for visualization purposes. We don't really need that. I'm going to keep that in for now. And then in the paint node, we could do all our modifications. Paint a scar or whatever we want to do with this face. But since I'm not really that fond of the Roto Paint node, or better to say, since we are going to change the face in a major way, I would suggest that we'll just write out our frame here, just a single one, and I'll write out one frame just like this. Not with a smiley on, just like this, so we know where to paint. And I'll write out a frame with our UV map on top, just so we have an orientation. Okay, so I'm going to render this out, and then I'm going to swap to the Photoshop side of things. Okay, I've brought my files into Photoshop. You can see I've got my main texture, and I've also got my grid just in case I need to check on where I'm lined up. That could be quite nice to see where actually the center line of the face is. So yeah, I brought these in, and what I'm going to do now is I'm probably just going to do a little time lapse as I go about painting away. So I'll just start to paint out the area that I wanted to be affected. This could be my scar or whatever we want to. Then here I draw something that looks like an edge, maybe peeled off skin. Drawing some shadows, some hard lines. And with some of these smaller lines, if they look too sharp, then I just, take the smudge tool, smudge that. Here I just add in some more shadows. And some highlights maybe, some brighter edges. Smudge them a little bit. Some sharper shadows. And then since my painting's not that good, I just added in a couple of things that I found on the internet. I used them as textures. I found this heart, and I just moved that around, see if I can, if there's a nice effect somewhere. Pretty fleshy stuff, pretty bloody, and I think something like that could work. You just have to move it in the right position, and I often do this also, if I work on a character or something, I kind of do this as a sketch, I just grab fleshy stuff or whatever I need off the internet, kind of position it, paint away, and see how that comes together. Now this looks like a horn or something that has been sawed off. My Bloody Valentine's is in there somewhere as well, so I'll take that out. Yeah. Just erasing the edges that I don't need. Back to my original scar, my peely edge. Still got parts of that word in there. Take that out. And I mean, these textures are, you know, pretty low res, so our result isn't that good, and I'm not going to clean it up completely. I mean, usually, you know, this takes a little bit more time, but I'm just doing it really roughly so you can get the idea and you can try to do your own, come up with something really nice. It's a little bit too red down there. Take that out. Yeah, eye back in. And then we also need some more detail on the nose, you know, because this is a squashed version, everything's distorted, so we would usually have to take care that you know, our texture doesn't distort in a strange way. And I think I should have probably paid more attention to the cheek. Here I did an alpha that we're going to use. Just trying one of the plastic wrapper effects in Photoshop, if that could work. Just have a play with it, what that does. Okay, so we're back in Nuke. Let's have a look how our Photoshop image turned out. Image read, and let's grab the head UV color. That's the one I painted in. There we go. I'll just move out a bit, create some more room. Connect that to the view. So here we go. That's what I've just created in Photoshop. It's not perfect. Yeah. So let's connect that to our geometry right here. By the way, we can also get rid of our little smiley. We don't really need that anymore. This one. Let's get rid of that. And let's go down to the scanline render and see how that turned out. Okay, doesn't seem like we're getting a whole lot. Let's check the size here. That seems to be all right. Oh yeah, what I think has happened is that this camera's expression, you can see there's this little E right here, is connected to the tracker, the camera tracker in our group. Now probably this camera has trouble accessing it, and we can see we don't have any translation, no rotation in the projection tab. Everything's set to 0, and if we go to edit expressions, we can see it's connected to the camera tracker one, camera translate, and that creates an error. Now we can very simply solve this by just telling Nuke where to look for it at this point. So let's say your parents are in projection group. That's what we called the group earlier. And let's see if that does anything. Maybe I wrote parents instead of parent. So that we can see here we're getting our values back again. So let's just copy parent projection group and then add that to the other fields as well. And we'll do that for the rotation. Okay, and probably also all of the other fields here. Sorry about that, but I didn't think about it when I created the group. There. 1, 2 more. Did I just do that? Yeah. but still parent. So what was the problem here? And we immediately have our image back again. I'm sorry that this happened. And now you can see we have our little expression, and that's going into our group directly, so we're all set again. Okay, so back to our scanline render here. This is what we're getting out from our scanline renderer. You can see, we should go back to Photoshop, correct this texture here where we have this massive skoo, and also around the nose that doesn't look nice. Otherwise, I think his forehead looks alright. And if we now move through, we can see our head is bobbing along. The only thing is we don't have his facial expressions anymore. It's just a moving head now. That's because we still, are completely on the painted version. There's no movement in here. So we kind of need to get back to our moving footage here, where we clearly have movement. So we need to merge them. So let's create a little bit of space here, and then I'll add another merge. We'll connect our B input and our A input, connect our viewer to our merge. Now we've got this half transparent overlay. I'll just make a little bit more room because we still need to add a shuffle in here. There we go, and we'll connect this like this, and we'll shuffle in some white. So now we've got our mask correctly, but still we have the rest of the image, so we need to cut that out, and I've drawn an alpha, which we're also going to add in now. And the images, and it's the head alpha. Open that up, and we'll add a shuffle copy this time. There we go. Add that to our alpha right here, and we need to shuffle that in place. Now, because I still want to preserve the alpha that's coming down here, I'll just create a new channel here, call that shape, and then shape dot alpha. Okay, I'm going to feed in my red here. If I now now connect my viewer to the shuffle and then switch to shape, then I can see we've now taken our little alpha and pop that into our shape layer right here. Now, of course, we also have to reconnect our merge right here, drag that down a little bit further, and now if I connect my viewer to the merge, we've still got a transparent area, so what are we missing? We're missing a pre-mult. And we'll select that to our shape right here. Okay, so what did I miss? Probably shuffled something. Oh yeah, here. This alpha has to go in there. And then I think that should do the job. Let's have a look. And you can see we now have movement in our face, and our mask is stuck right on top. Now, of course, we also have to connect our merge to our input of the geometry. And then I'll quickly move these around, just a little bit of cleaning up so everything stays in line. We know we rendered something out here that came in here, and then we have a bunch of shuffles, and I'm just going to rename this shuffle and call that shape so that we know we're introducing a new layer right here. Okay, so now if we go down to our skyline renderer, connect our view again, that's what we're getting through our scanline renderer. Now, if we have a look at the alpha, we still get our alpha head here with a bit of stuff that's keyed out, former green. And if we go to other layers, here we have our shape. And unfortunately, our shape is not coming through, I guess. So I must have, once again, forgotten something. Let's move back up where we merged the two, and in the merge, also merge shape, or we could also set it to all if we had more layers to merge. I'm just going to leave it with all. Now you can see that our shape has been distorted just like the rest of our mask, of our scar right here, and that can come in pretty handy later on. If we have that mask, we could do some more color correction or cut that out somehow, I don't know. So it's just a good thing to have that additional shape. Now let's switch back to our RGBA. And I just scrub through a couple of frames. We get our mask sitting where it's supposed to be, but it still feels a bit stiff, there's no movement. It just really feels like a hard shape stuck onto our head, and yeah, it would be cool if we could somehow solve that. Now, one way to get a little bit of movement into this part here would be to add a grid warp or some kind of warp tool and animate that. And how to do that I'm going to show you in the next step.